We're going to be creating a to-do list using our newly acquired knowledge on lists, and well, also using loops with lists so that we can create a better user experience for anyone that uses this application or this Python program. So let's just get into it. So first off, it's expected that you've opened up PyCharm and created a new project. Call the project to-do list, just like I have, so that you know what this project actually contains or what kind of code does this project contains. As always, you can find this code, the completed code for this program or this exercise in the course resources. Anyways, let's get into it. So the first step is to create an empty list. So to create an empty list, what we do is we simply write our list name. So in this case, let's just keep it simple and call the list to do and make that equal to an empty list. This is new to all of y'all, wherein we create an empty list simply using empty squared parentheses or square brackets. Now, just for representation's sake, we could print out our list to do and run it to see that it really is empty. Next, the step says ask the user to populate the list. This means that in this step, we're going to be asking the users to type in their to-do list or add items to their to-do list. To do this, let's first off understand that we need to use the append function, which allows us to add items to the list or put items inside our list. Now, what we want to do here is we want to add a certain number of items that the user might have wanted to add in the list and then run a loop for those many times and then use the append function those many times. So the first thing we need here is the number of items that the user wants to add. So let's ask the user how many number of items do they want to add. So let's create a variable called number of items and make that equal to an input which asks them kindly enter the number of items you would want to add in your to-do list, and a colon, and yeah, oh, of course, just correct the typos, so that would be your. Cool. So now that this is done, let's move ahead and see if this code is okay. Well, it looks okay, but since we are asking for the number of items, I believe we should take this input as an integer, and we already know that the input function by default gives out a string. So we need to typecast this with the int typecast. So the input function goes inside the int typecast, and now the string input will be considered as an integer. Next, what we want to do is we want to write our loop to actually have the user enter those items in the list. For this, let's do one thing. Let's use the for loop. So for I in range, and this would be number of items. So our loop goes from 0 to the number of items. So I in range number of items basically means 0 comma number of items. So the lower limit is 0, or the starting point is 0, and the ending point is number of items minus 1. So if the number of items is 3, then your loop goes from 0, 1, and 2. If the number of items is 5, it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It never goes to 5, right? Because our list, if it has 5 elements, the index or the indices would be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for I in range 0 to the number of items, what you want to do is you simply want to take another variable or another input from the user, which is something like item name equals input enter your list item, and then simply to do dot append. And what do you want to append here? You simply want to append the item name. And that's it. You don't need an update statement because, as we know, the range function takes care of it, and by default it's just going to take the values from 0 to +1 and +1 and +1 until it reaches number of items -1. So let's run this and see if we've got it right. So our program now says kindly enter the number of items you would want to add in your to-do list. All right, I would want to add about 3 items. So enter your list items. So maybe something like wake up, take, oops, take breakfast, and finally something like get ready for work. Now that we have all of these in place, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and display this list. So to display this list, right after this, we could print something like number of items. Oops, not number of items, but the to-do list. All right, let's go ahead. So again, it's going to ask us this, so 3, and I'll just change the items to be something simpler type. That'll be apples, oranges, and mango. And yeah, we've got this list right here. Let's use a for loop to print it, just the way we learned in the last one. So for I in to do, print I. And when we run this, again, we obviously need to give it input. So 3 list items going to be apples, oranges, and mango. Yep. So we're able to print our list. So as of now, our program is logically correct. But what we want it to do is we also want it to look good, right? So for the program to look good, we need to write some extra print statements that make more sense and add to the design or the user interface of this simple program. So to do that, first off, before we print the list, right here, we'll print out star multiplied by 20 or asterisk multiplied by 20. This essentially means that we want 20 asterisks in one line so that it separates the inputs from the output. Next, what you want to do is you want to add indices to each of these list elements. So the indices need to be counted, right? And since our for loop doesn't really give us indices here in this case, what we could do is we could simply write for I in range 0 comma len of to do, and then we could print str of I plus period space plus to do at position I, right? So what this does is now we've got a value to our I, which is a numeric value, which goes from 0 to len of to do minus 1. And then str of I basically typecasts the integer I to a string. It concatenates it to this period and space, which is basically just for representation purposes, and that concatenates to our list elements. So we know that at position I, we have a certain list element at that position. So now if I run this and create our list, so 3 apples, oranges, mango. And now we know that apples is at position 0, oranges at 1, and mango at 2. Sorry for the typo with the spelling of mango, but well, that's alright. Now, in this case, let's just make it a little more good to look at. So I'm going to print out, here's your list, and then we'll print the asterisk again and run that once more. So we got that, apples, oranges, mango, and yeah, that's how it is. So let's just fix our typos once. So that should be, here's your list, and we've got that in place. Also, one more thing that we should change is we should ask the user to enter your list item at position, certain position, right? So enter your list item at position, and then we could end this plus str of I and then plus this, right? So the program experience becomes much better, or the user experience becomes much better because the program looks better. So kindly enter the number of items you want to add to your to-do list. That would be 3. Position 0 would be apples, oranges, mango. Yeah, we got that right this time. So this is our list. The next thing that we want to do here is step 3, which would be create a menu for operations on the to-do list. So what we want to do is we want to allow the user to add elements to this list, remove elements from this list, and also change elements on this list. So let's do that. So first off, to create a menu, let's create a multi-line string. I'm going to create that string inside a variable called menu, and that's going to be equal to a multi-line string with just 3 single quotes or 3 double quotes for the starting and the ending. Now, in this multi-line string, let's first off add something like number 1, number 2, and number 3. The first operation I want add an item to the list, remove an item from the list, and the third element should be well, change an item in the list. So these are the 3 elements that we want. Now the 3 operations that we want, and obviously what we could do is just write choice here with a colon and space so that the user can actually type their input right here. So once that's done, let's print out star multiplied by 20 just so that that's separated. Print list operations. Oh, and also let's give the user a chance to display the list, right? So now that this is done, list operations, we print out the star again or the asterisk, and let's see how this looks. We'll simply write, so menu needs to be an input. That's something that we need to change, and we're good to go. So the menu is an input, and this is what it's going to look like. We need our menu to come below the list operations print statements, and when we run it, we've got 3 items in our list that are apples, oranges, and mango. And once that's done, you can see that we move on to our list operations. So list operations say add an item to the list, remove an item, and then you've got an option for choice. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are the choices. Right now, nothing happens when I give a choice because we've not written any logic to handle user choices. So first off, again, I'd want you to observe that the input statement is going to give us a string output. So the user typing 1, 2, 3, 4 would actually be typing a string 1, 2, 3, 4, or a string 1, 2, 3, 4 will be stored inside the menu variable. So to handle that, let's just typecast this input with an int typecast so that the string input is typecasted into an int input. Let's move on to step 4 for this project, which is to create functions for each list operation on the menu. Now, we've got 3 main operations that we're going to be covering with functions, and the 4th one, well, we'll just code that in the if-else that we write in step 5. So as of now, let's move on to the first one and take it step by step. The first function is going to be a function to add an item to our to-do list. So let's create a function called add item, and this takes a list as a parameter, so TODO, we'll just call that list TODO. And then in this function, what we want to do is we want to ask the user for the item that they want to add. So item equals input, enter your item, and then we could simply use the append function to append this item to the to-do list. So that would be todo.append and the item. Once this is done, let's just print item added successfully. So item added successfully. Now that this is done, just fix our naming so that it's in camel case and move on to the next function. Before that, we want to also return this list to do, which is being changed in our function right here. So this add item function basically asks the user to give an input for the item that they want to add. It takes a parameter to do, so it takes a list as an input, or it takes a list as a parameter, and then it appends an item to that list. It prints that the item has been added successfully, and then it returns the list that has been changed. So we'll just change that and move on to the next function. The next function is to remove an item from the list. So to remove an item from the list, that is def remove item, and let's take the to-do list again. Now to remove an item from the list, we need to know which item the user wants to remove. So in this case, first off, we need to display the list. So let's use the for loop to display our list. So for I in range 0 to the length of our to-do list, and then we print str of I plus period space plus to do at position I. And before this list is printed, once this list is printed, let's create a variable called choice and ask the user to choose the index of the item that needs to be removed. So choice is going to be an input. Kindly choose the index of the item to be removed. Now we all know that this index is going to be should be an int index, so let's just typecast our input to an integer as always for this program and move ahead. So now once the user gives us that choice, we'll simply type if choice is greater than or equal to the length of to do. So what this means is that if the number that the user has entered is greater than this length of the to do or is equal to the length of the to do, it really is not an index. So we simply say print invalid input, print operation failed. All right, elif choice is less than len of to do, then you simply you simply go ahead and remove it. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to take the to do dot pop and we want to pop at the index. So in this case, the index is choice, and we simply print item removed successfully. Yep. Now, when we look at this code, there's a couple of problems here. First problem that I see here is that this block of code right here, while it might work, it's actually just too many lines of code, and maybe we could write it using a different logic. So let's try and restructure this block before we go ahead. So just reworking our logic here to remove our item at a given position by the user once the list has been printed. First off, what we want to see is if the choice of index exists in the list. Next, if it does not exist, tell the user about it. If it does, perform the operation and return the list. So let's just fix our typos. Now, these are the three things that we need to take a look at. So if the choice of the index exists in the list, and if it does not exist, tell the user. So first off, we need to check whether the value entered by the user is not less than 0 and the value entered by the user is not equal to or greater than the length of this list. So we'll check if choice is not equal to, not, is not equal to the length of our list to do, or a better one would be if choice is greater than or equal to the length of to do, or choice is less than 0, then you simply want to print invalid choice. Try again. The next thing that we want to do is write our elif. So you've already completed these 2 points here. Now we'll write our elif, which comes with this one. So our elif won't really be an elif, it'll just be an else. Because if this condition is not satisfied, that means that the choice is basically valid, or it's a legal choice. So in the else block, what we're going to do is we're actually going to perform the operation. So to perform the operation, it's simple. It's todo dot pop. And what we want to pop here is we simply want to pop the item at position choice. So once that's done, we'll print item removed successfully, and we'll return the list that is to do. And well, now we don't really need this, so let's just remove that. So now that we've got a more sophisticated remove item function, we have fixed it, and obviously, well, we're done with it. Now the next thing that we want to do here is also return to do at the end of this, because just in case this option is executed, your list remains the same. So we'll just return the same list out of the function, and if this option is executed, then we'll return the popped list out of the function. So it's better to have our return to do at the function level instead of the else level. So now that these 2 functions are done, let's go ahead and take a break and write our if-else statement, which is step 5. So it says, write the if-else structure to do what the user has chosen. Now, taking a look at our program, we've got our menu. The menu gives an input. The first option is to add an item to the list. So if menu equals 1, then we want our add item function. So we'll write todo equals add item, and this takes a list, right? So we're going to pass the to-do list here, and then add item takes this to-do list, it runs the code, and then returns the new to-do list and stores it inside this variable to do. And then let's just display the list. So print displaying your list, and for I in to do, print I. So let's run this and see if that works correctly. So first off, let's create our list. So 3 items, apples, mango, and oranges. All right, so we've got our list printed here. It says here's your list. Then we have our list operations right here. So the list operation that we have coded for right now is add an item to the list. So that's just 1. I press enter, it executes that. The function add item, it asks me whether, like, what item do I want to add. So in this case, let me add an item that says maybe pineapple. And now item is added successfully, and then it displays my list, and it also adds pineapple to my list. So that is actually pretty simple. Now there's one thing that I've observed here, which is we have been wanting to display the list quite often. And in contrast to what I said earlier, I believe we might need a display list function more than we thought we would. So let's just create a display list function before this add item function. So in step 4, I'm just going to create a def display list. Which is going to take the list, and let's just write a simple while loop. So I equals 0 for I in for sorry, we don't need this for loop. We just need while I is less than len of to do, print str of I plus period space plus to do at position I, and well, that's how we display our list, and that's all we need. So that's our display list function. So instead of this whole thing, we could simply write display list and pass our to-do list, run it, see if it works. So 3 apples, oranges, bananas, and please excuse the typos, but well, that's all right. And we want to add an item, would be pineapples. Oh, so what's happened is we've run into a forever loop or an infinite loop, and this could potentially crash your computer. So to avoid this, first off, we need to check our code. So I'm just going to stop the code right there, go up and see what we missed. If you already realize what we missed the update statement. So I is always equal to 0, and that's why it always prints the list item at position 0 and never stops, because this condition is never false. So we'll write I equals I plus 1, and once that's done, let's run. 3 items, apples, oranges, bananas. My choice is 1, enter my item, pineapples, and now we've got our list. Our item has been added successfully, and then it displays our list, and it says 0, apples at 0, oranges at 1, bananas at 2, and pineapples at 3. Again, we have a typo, but it's all right. We'll fix it in the next try. So we've got our display list function working correctly, and now we can use that in every function that we have. So we've got if menu equals 1. Now elif menu equals 2. You want to remove an item, so to do equals remove item, and you pass the to-do list, and then displaying your list. Oops. And once this is done, we simply call our display list function and just call it to do and pass the to-do list. So let's try this out. So it'll be 3, and then element at position 0, apples, bananas, and well, mango. Yeah, we got the spellings right this time. And let's expand this. This time we want to test the remove an item from the list, so choice is going to be 2. Now here it's again, well, it is displaying our list, so it should really tell us that, okay, I think it should ask us to choose the index of the item to be removed at the top instead of at the bottom, but let's fix that later. So it displays our list, and it says kindly choose the index of the item to be removed. So in this case, let's say we want to remove, I don't know, mango. So that'll be 2, and well, it removes mango. So that's perfect. Now that is working, let's go ahead and write our next function. So our next function is going to be to change an item in the list. So to change an item in the list, again, we need to, well, display the list first, just like we had to right here. So what we could do is, first off, we could go ahead and print the list. So our function would be def change item, and that takes our to-do list, And then what we want to do is we want to display list, which is the to-do list. And then basically we write choice equals input. Kindly enter the index of the item you'd like to change. And then the user chooses the index of the item from this display list function. And once that's done, first off, check whether that choice really even exists, or if that item really even exists, or the index that the user has typed really even exists. So again, we'll have if choice is greater than or equal to len of the to-do list, or choice is less than 0, then we print invalid choice. Try again. Else, what we want to do is we want to change that item. So once the user has made that choice, to change the item, what we need to do is we just need to write to do at the choice equals input, because it's going to be an input, right? So we want to store this input inside the to-do list at that choice index. And the input is basically going to be enter your changed value. And now, once this is done, we can type print value changed successfully and return our to-do list at the end of the function at the function level. So now once this is done, let's move on to elif menu equals 3. You simply want to make to do equals change item, and you pass the to-do list in this, and then you print displaying your list, and then use the display list function to display your new to-do list. And once that is done, well, this one should work. So when I run this, again, it asks me to create my list. So 3 apples, oranges, bananas. And now I want to change an item in my list. So choice 3, it shows me my list. That's apples, oranges, and bananas. Maybe I just want to change oranges. So at position 1. And now it gives me an error. It says this is not supported between the instances of str and int. So it looks like we're comparing a string and an int. So let's see how have we made that mistake. So in this case, we've got choice, which is an input, but we forgot to typecast it to an integer. So that will be int. And now this should work flawlessly. So that's 3 apples, oranges, bananas, and then we want to change the item in our list. So that should be choice number 3. We want to change oranges at position 1. It asks me to enter the changed value. So let's make that pineapples. And now our new list is apples, pineapples, and bananas. Pretty simple, right? Finally, let's move on to just displaying the list, which we've already handled. So elif choice equals for display list, menu equals for display list, and we pass our to-do list. And finally in the else, this means that the user has not entered any one of these numbers, so that is an invalid input. We simply write invalid input. Try again. So let's try out our program. First off, let's create like a bigger list. So this time I'm going to have 5 items. My first item is going to be apples, bananas, oranges, pineapples, and maybe milk. Okay, so here's my list. It says apples, bananas, oranges, pineapples, and milk, and then my list operations. So in this case, maybe I just want to, delete one item. So let's delete pineapples. So I'm going to go to second, which is the remove an item. I will remove item at position 3, and then item removed successfully, and now my list is apples, bananas, oranges, and milk. So pineapples doesn't exist anymore in my list, and well, it's done. But now the question is, how are you going to run this program over and over and over and over again once the user has created that list? This means that you probably really need to create and write a loop which would run forever with an exit statement or an exit option, something like this menu right here, which we've defined up here, could have 5 exit, right? And when the user presses 5, the program exits itself. But unless the user presses 5, the program does not exit itself. So how are you going to make sure that you kind of write this whole thing and the program keeps going on until the user presses exit, and unless the user presses exit, it constantly just keeps showing the user this menu so that the user can do all kinds of actions with their list. Now that is a challenge for you. A quick hint on that would be to use a while loop, and it needs to be, well, a forever loop or an infinite loop. So you could just use while true. So until then, and it just needs to go on. And once the user presses 5, your program just needs to break out of the loop and stop. So that's going to be a challenge for you. Obviously, the solution is going to be in the next one. But until then, just have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.